It is the sound of ideas from 90.3. Time now for the next installment in a special reporting project here at IdeaStream. The series is called Learning Curve, examining the past, present, and future of K through 12 public education in Ohio. It's being led by public radio station WKSU in partnership with IdeaStream. Together, we're examining public education in Ohio, the state of funding, opportunity gaps, inequity, the role of public schools in child welfare, and Common Core curriculum structure. We're also reporting on the profound impact of the pandemic on public education. The final phase of the project will be focused on finding solutions that can transform public education for the better. The pandemic has profoundly impacted the ways that so-called wraparound services are being provided in Northeast Ohio for both children and for families in need. These services address challenges that could impede learning or access to education. IdeaStream's education reporter Jenny Hamill's been reporting on ways that support service providers are staying ahead of what students and families most need while the children are remote learning and on making sure those needs are met. She's here this morning to talk about that. Hey, Jenny.
Hi, Rick. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for doing this as well. If you'd like to join our conversation, 866-578-0903. Email is soi@wcpn.org, or you may tweet us. We are at Sound of Ideas. Jenny, you spoke with support service providers that work for the Say Yes Cleveland College Scholarship Program. What did they share in terms of how the pandemic's impacted the way they provide support to students and families?
Well, in some respects, it's changed everything as far as how they find out about what the students or their families that are in need, what they need, and how they deliver those services. So, CMSD remote since last spring, these service support specialists have to give a special creative way of finding out what do these kids need. They can't rub elbows with them in the hallway or invite them to lunch. So they have to somehow either get referrals from teachers or reach out individually to students and families themselves in order to find out what the services are, and then some have been going to people's homes to deliver these services. So it really has changed everything. And so the gamut of needs as well, it's gone from the types of things that I think you would kind of generally think of as related to poverty, but now with the pandemic, it's added a whole new kind of echelon of needs that they have to provide as well.
Yeah, I heard your feature yesterday in Morning Edition. A gentleman was actually providing a hotspot at somebody's front door just to
Yeah,
get them
so
through.
Yeah, and so when you think of a family that maybe doesn't have internet access and whether they can't afford it or it's just a choice, you now have a kid, Frank Kilgore. He's a 15-year-old that was featured in my story, who was sharing one hotspot because the other one had broken with 6 siblings. So, how are you going to get a child to kind of keep up with the rest of his peers when he's fighting for internet speed and internet access with his siblings? It really is something where you're really kind of seeing some cracks in the way kids are able to continue with remote learning. So Michael Copeland, a service provider out of Mound STEM School, he works for the P16 program, went to his home with 2 T-Mobile hotspots to help him get that faster internet access so he can do his job as a student.
Tell me more about these folks like Copeland, family support specialists. Who are they? What do they provide?
So the family support specialists that we're about to hear from, they are working through the Say Yes Cleveland program. So as we know, we've talked about them a lot on our station. Say Yes is all about getting Cleveland students graduated and on to college, and if they can commit to that, they'll provide them a scholarship. So in the recent years, they have raised from corporate philanthropies almost $100 million. They now have 1,000 scholars in post-secondary colleges getting education. So that's the whole goal. But, part of their ethos is in order to get a kid ready for college, they need to be able to get an education from kindergarten, pre-kindergarten on up. And so a lot of these kids who are living in poverty or have struggles, they need help to get certain barriers out of the way. And that's where these family support specialists come in. There's one right now assigned to 42 schools, and they connect families and students with services. So I want you to hear from Arnisha Rogers first. She is a family support specialist at Mary Bethune, which is a pre-K through 8th grade school. And I asked her what students at the school she particularly serves.
So I focus on the entire building. So the entire building, all of those are my babies. The families, the anyone that's connected to our kids. It's not like a set of 25 caseload. It really is all 275 families and kids. Um, and what those services look like, because I'm the connector as a family support specialist, I help families get connected to services that get in the way of any barriers that may be in the way of their education.
What needs is the pandemic, in your experience, created for these kids and their families?
So I like to call them seasons of needs, because that need that was in the beginning of the pandemic changed to the need that is now. So, for example, in the beginning of the when the pandemic started, we all transitioned remotely. The need was technology, right? Internet services, laptops, daycare, where what am I going to do with my kids? They usually go to school and I can go to work. Then the need changed to, I don't know how to log on my laptop. I don't know how to. So other things went out the door and some things came in. And so I kind of go with those changes, and it looks different for every building. But for my building currently, now that we moved past that season, and although we teeter totter with those things back and forth because we know how technology is, but the need for my building would more so be for food insecurities. Um, Legal service aren't isn't a big issue at this point, but a month ago it was. So that changes. But we also have a lot of families that did not have jobs. And with the social support that they were currently getting, it's just never enough. And so oftentimes my families will come to me and say, I'm good for now. But by the end of the month, I know that they need that additional assistance for food and possibly maybe help with utilities. And I can use one of my community partners and refer them there. Clothes. We have families who often experience fires as well. So as a team, we're pulling on each other like, hey, do you got a size 4 in a coat? Do you have a size pants? And I've even found myself keeping my own kids' clothes just to make sure I can help a family in need if I ever did. So I don't think it's just because they're frontline workers that those were the ones that kept open, like Giant Eagle or CVS or organizations such as that. I think we also had an abundance of families who just needed extra help. Not all help from them, but the assistance to kind of balance out what they didn't have or couldn't provide for themselves towards the end of the month.
So give me a picture of what you would have done last year on campus with, let's say you want to provide some assistance or services to a student. What would that have looked like last year?
So for me, I always invited my kids to come have lunch with me. That was one of the ways that I found was a good way to build rapport. So either going into the lunchroom or just saying, hey, I'm just taking a group of 5 and we're going to have lunch. Or this year I planned on implementing games like Uno and taking it a step further. So I can't do that this year. I'm going into the new year for school, so I wanted to try to find ways that I could be creative where I can have more student interaction. So with that being said, I just took it like, hey, what do you need? Do you need me to go deliver laptops or food? Or, I did more of that. That way they were able to still see me in person, not as often, but still be able to build that family rapport and student rapport ongoing in that way, and then providing the service as well.
Seasons of needs, Jenny, is an interesting concept that she brings up. Seems the job of teaching and giving support at all generally harder with all the students learning remotely. Did Arnisha tell you how it's been for her emotionally trying to provide services with everybody at a distance?
It was interesting, Rick. I really found that there was kind of a positive can do attitude in my conversations with the support service workers because that's what they do. It can be trying to hear of how a person is struggling or a student is struggling and the fact that they needs to rise to the level to be kind of on an equal playing field as other students. But yeah, having the students remote, not seeing them physically, and knowing that some might be experiencing some sort of loss, whether it's related to COVID or not, and not being able to know that immediately, I do think it's hard on them. And Arnisha said something that I found particularly poignant. It stuck with me. I had asked her if there had been a low point in during the pandemic of doing the work that she does, and she said that she would say the low point is hearing about child loss. So what that means is students who've actually died or passed away, and not just due to COVID, but as she said, due to life. And that she would learn about a student that had passed in weekly meetings that they have when they're talking about the work that they're doing. And so, that kind of disconnect and hearing about that loss and not having the immediacy of the interactions with the kids, I think that is hard on the support workers, on the service workers. So, yeah, I think it is taking a toll. I think they're excited to get back into the classroom in some
Yeah,
respects.
I bet they are. You mentioned earlier that 40 some odd schools have something like this, and I know you spoke with another family support specialist, Sarah, who's at Campus International. What's her story? What's she been facing?
Yeah, like Arnisha, Sarah Days really says food insecurity is a big deal, and you're dealing with families who've either lost jobs or aren't working and or afraid to leave their homes because of COVID. And Eric Gordon has said, CMSD, we've got like 85% children of color, and it is hitting COVID is hitting our students and their families 3 to 4 times more severely than their white peers. So that's a difficulty. But Sarah works at Campus International, and she told me what she's been facing. One of the things that she has had to do is be inventive with how she connects with the students and families. So here's Sarah Days.
I feel like I've been more creative this year in getting in touch with families than I have in years past. So I have texted every single family at the school personally. I have made tons of phone calls. Even if a family doesn't like explicitly say they need assistance with resources, I still like to call just to check in on people. Again, get my name out there, introduce myself one more time, because I feel like kids are really struggling with not being able to see their friends or be in classes or have the schedule that they're used to. So it's a lot of phone interactions that I've been doing and just trying to be as available as I can to families throughout the school day, sometimes during the weekends, but just letting them know, my phone's always open. You can text me, call me, email me, whatever works best for you.
What has been the gamut of services that you find yourself giving to these kids and their families this year?
So I just actually got back I do lunch delivery every Monday and Tuesday. The schools have been so awesome. They are providing school lunches for families. So Tuesday, I just get enough food to last the rest of the week for families. And then Monday is just the 1 day delivery. So that has been a big issue for families, I think, is just feeling comfortable to go out of the house. I shared some of those, hesitations of like, do I want to go to the grocery store right now? Some of our families are just not able to get there. Either they have little ones at home that they have to be there to make sure they're completing their schoolwork, or it's just not feasible. So I do a lot of lunch deliveries, which has been another really great way for people to actually see who I am. I just drop it off on their porch, text them that it's outside, give a wave from the car, and, at least I'm not just a stranger over the phone. I've done a lot of like rental assistance referrals. In the beginning of when COVID started, there were like some grace periods for different housing opportunities throughout the city. But I find myself giving people the information to reach out to different organizations to get some sort of rental assistance. And then Say Yes has a really awesome survey that we've been giving out to every family. We've asked families to fill it out, teachers, and then kids 5th grade and up to fill out the surveys for themselves. And has a long list of questions, but at the end, some of those questions trigger red flags. And so then I can go through and see, what do kids feel that they might be struggling with? What do families feel, and teachers? And so I've had a lot of mental health referrals. So I not necessarily that a kid is struggling with a huge mental health issue, but I would say kids feeling really down. I've had a lot of parents use the word depressed, and I think that goes back to kids just being stuck in the house. They haven't seen their friends for almost a year. School can be an escape for a lot of kids, and they just don't even have that experience to get out of the house and do something different.
Talking with Jenny Hamill, Idea Stream's education specialist, I was struck, Jenny, by Sarah saying she texted every family at the school. I think we disconnected people kind of need to know that thing goes on.
Yeah, and here's what's I thought kind of cool. One of our colleagues at IdeaStream, her kid was going to Campus International, and she scrolled through her missed voicemails and saw a call from Sarah back in December, and so true to her word, really doing important work. I spoke with Diane Downing, who's the executive editor at Say Yes,
Hmm.
executive director at Say
Director,
Yes,
right?
and she said that for these, family support specialists, this is so much more than a job. It is a mission and a calling. And I've got to say, in speaking to these women, these individuals, Michael Copeland, you can feel that, and it really feels like they are doing important work that is really kind of serving just an important role for society.
I know you also talked to Diane about the college scholarship aspect. How are those folks doing?
Yeah, so when the pandemic started last spring, everyone had to pivot. And so the Say Yes partners at College Now, they're the ones that are really in close contact with the scholars at all the campuses. Again, we've got 1,000 Cleveland kids now going on to their second post-secondary education, and they made sure that these students were staying COVID safe, had what they needed in terms of tech and computers and housing, made sure that they had housing if the dorms were closing. So it has been an ongoing effort to make sure that these kids, just like the K through 12 students, can continue on with their education while the pandemic is ongoing. It was interesting because now that everyone is seeing a light at the end of the tunnel back to the K through 12 level, and CMSD is planning on having on students return at least in a hybrid capacity. Now, also the family support specialists going back to the brick and mortar, but they're also thinking about the students who are going to stay remote. So here's what Downing had to say about that.
We're connecting as schools reopen face to face in the school buildings, but also recognizing that there will continue to be students who want to work remotely through our learning pods, and there will be families that will continue to need our services, whether it's food insecurity or legal referrals or counseling.
You talked about going back to brick and mortar, but still having remote students. The wraparound services have to change too.
Yeah. So these family support specialists, again, they'll go back in their offices in these school buildings. Again, there's about 42 right now, and they will once again see students in the hallways and be able to kind of see them in the classroom and have a more immediate relationship with the teacher when they might have a referral. But they have to be thinking about those students who are still staying home to learn or learning in a pod because maybe the home is not hospitable. As we know, there have been local nonprofits that Say Yes has been working with as well that have provided pods for students who are really in need when it comes to tech or when it comes to kind of a safe environment to be during the day. So the family support specialists, just like many teachers, are having to kind of be in two places as once. They have to think about the students within the buildings and also, maybe about half that are still learning remotely. So it's a daunting task.
It is daunting. You also talked to Diane about how those changes are coming into place. What did she have to say?
Yeah, Diane had this kind of sense of she wanted to let me know that Say Yes was not hindered by this pandemic, that she sees the great impacts of what they are doing. She's proud of the program and the effect it's already had. She says they are already readying current seniors for college next year, and that process goes on. And, right now you've got 42 family support specialists working with CMSD and partner charter schools, but she says the rollout will continue. Here's a bit of what she told me.
We're staying true to our original rollout. We, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to take on another 30 schools this fall and then the remaining 30 the following fall. COVID has not stopped us. It has not stopped our mission, either on the service side or on the scholarship side. It's just too important for our students and their families.
Jenny, what I hear is optimism.
Yeah, absolutely. In many respects, you can say there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and the pandemic has been a humongous setback for all, but kids continuing to learn and have bright futures, and I think Downing and the family support specialists that I spent time with really feel like there are promising futures ahead for these kids. So you kind of have to, stay the path and continue on.
And continue on, yes. As we mentioned, Jenny, this reporting project being done in partnership with WKSU. Two of our colleagues there, Feluke Amundsen and Mark Earhart, have a piece on wraparound services for students in Akron. It's well worth a listen. Feluke's story on how urban schools are addressing the digital divide airs tomorrow on 90.3 on All Things Considered and on Morning Edition. Thank you to them. Thank you to you for the valuable work that you're putting in here.
Always a pleasure, Rick. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. You can find out more about Learning Curve by visiting our website at ideastream.org/ideasnow or by visiting wksu.org. If you'd like to get the last word on today's topics, there are ways to do that. You can give us a call, 216-916-6397, that's 916-NEWS, or send an email, soi@wcpn.org. We're also on Twitter, at Sound of Ideas, and we're on Facebook. Coming up tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas, I talk with Dr. Tom Mahalovic, President and CEO of the Cleveland Clinic, as the healthcare giant marks 100 years. If you missed any portion of this program, hear it again on demand online or by downloading the podcast. You can also hear a rebroadcast tonight at 9 on 90.3 WCPN. I'm Rick Jackson. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
You're listening to 90.3 WCPN, Cleveland. Idea Stream.